I am a fat white woman with brown curly hair, and I'm wearing a t-shirt that says "Less pity, more ramps." I am the founder and director of Access Mob Pittsburgh. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. Closed captions are available, and there is a link to the transcript that will be in the chat. Please remain muted and keep your cameras off during the presentation. This is both being recorded and being live streamed to YouTube. So anything that you say during the meeting will be recorded. If you are watching this on YouTube right now, any of the links that we mentioned during the course of this panel discussion, we will put in the description of the YouTube after we're done. Chat is disabled between participants. You may create a new chat with Access Mob Pittsburgh in the chat if you have a question or a problem. If you need to see how to do that, there's a link that's going to be posted in the chat now. Zoom has recently changed some of its settings, so if you're unfamiliar, again, check out the technical info page that's being posted in the chat now. Uh, if there is time for a Q&A at the end, please raise your hand. Either use the virtual reaction that's going to be on the bottom of your screen, or it's *9 to raise your hand if you are using your phone. You can message the Access Mob facilitator if there's a problem, and then wait to be called on. You will be asked to unmute and or turn on your camera. Unmuting with phone is *6 to mute or unmute. You may ask your question verbally or in ASL, or type questions into the chat for the Access Mob facilitator to read out loud. Don't turn your camera on unless you need to speak ASL, and then wait a moment for the interpreter to acknowledge you before you start asking your question. If we don't have time for questions at the end, please email your questions to accessmobpittsburgh@gmail.com. I want to take a quick second to send out some thank yous. First of all, to my board of directors, Debbie, Donna, Kendra, Monica, and Nyota. We couldn't do any of this without you. Thank you so much to Katie, who is our regular tech facilitator person. And then this is our first time doing a panel discussion. So extra thanks to Mirami for coming and helping us out. And by the way, if there are any kinks, problems, and stuff tonight with going through this, we apologize in advance. We will work through everything as best we can. Want to thank Disability Pride Pennsylvania for being our fiscal sponsor, and so many thanks to the Opportunity Fund for the grant that is that they've generously given us that is funding all of our upcoming events. At the end of the the panel tonight, I will be sending out a link to folks or an email to folks with a link to the YouTube video if you want to go back and rewatch it, any links that were mentioned during the discussion tonight, and then most importantly, there's going to be a survey going out. We really appreciate anyone answering that survey, just so we know what went well, what we can do better, who's coming to join us, and wonderful things like that. So I have covered everything on my list. Wonderful. I am going to turn this over to my wonderful friend Deja Baker to kick us off. Deja, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Deja Baker. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a Black woman with blue and green hair and wearing glasses. I am also wearing a t-shirt with black writing on it. You can't see it, but it says Poetic Justice. I have been organizing in Pittsburgh for 17 years and am the founder of Pittsburgh Feminists for Intersectionality, a mutual aid organization focused on supporting and uplifting our most marginalized, including people of color, queer people, and disabled people. I identify as a queer disabled person who identifies as mentally ill. I currently work in recovery and love what I do. I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you for trusting me to be a part of this conversation. Now, on to why we're here. The Week Without Driving is the brainchild of Anna Zievarts, the director of the Disability Mobility Innovative of Disability Rights Washington. As they put it, for too long, transportation policy has been written by and for drivers. For those of us who cannot drive or cannot afford to drive, this creates major barriers for us to access school, jobs, medical care, grocery stores, religious services, and everywhere else we need to go in order to fully participate in our communities. In 2021, they began the Week Without Driving so that people who drive can experience the barriers that non-drivers face in their everyday transportation. Thanks to the help of America Walks, this has become a national event where drivers and non-drivers can come together to advocate for better public transit and sidewalk infrastructure. After a successful inauguration event in 2024, Pittsburghers for Public Transit, Bike Pittsburgh, Access Mob Pittsburgh, and Age Friendly Greater Pittsburgh have partnered together for Allegheny County's second annual Week Without Driving, which is so exciting to me. I got to be a part of the first year, so thank you for letting me be a part of it this year as well. Between September 24th and October 5th, they've scheduled a series of events, including a press conference tomorrow, a Safe Sidewalks crew training on Thursday, and more. To find out more, go to weekwithoutdrivingpgh.org and click the Events tab up top. This year, over 120 people, including 14 elected officials, have taken the pledge to go a week or even a day without driving. And 60 plus organizations have signed up to participate and spread the word. If you haven't already done so, you can do it now at weekwithoutdrivingpgh.org. Tonight we are joined by Laura Chu Weens, Seth Bush, Elisa Grisham, and Cassandra Masters, who will be talking to you about what the Week Without Driving means for their organizations and for themselves. First, to our panelists, can you each please introduce yourself and tell us about your organization and who you represent, including your name, pronouns, an image description of yourself, your organization, and your title, and tell us about your constituency or those that you serve. I am going to start with Seth. Seth, since you are first on my screen.
Thank you so much, Deja. I'm so glad to be with everybody this evening. My name is Seth Bush, he, him. I'm a white man with red hair, little bit of a beard, light skin, blue checkered shirt, and an intentionally blurry background. I'm the advocacy manager at Bike Pittsburgh, and our mission at Bike Pittsburgh, yeah, bike is in the name, and we're so much more than that. We really are working to transform our streets to make biking and walking and rolling commonplace for all Pittsburghers in order to improve quality of life and reduce the harmful effects of car dependence on our communities. Yeah, so our constituency is anyone who bikes, walks, and rolls and wants to thrive without needing to own a car. And really delighted to be here with you this evening.
Thank you, Seth. It's good to be here with you. Laura, you will go next.
Hey, everybody. Seth, I confess I cannot see that beard, but she, her are my pronouns. I am a light-skinned, half-Chinese person with brown hair and bangs. I have a black t-shirt on from City of Asylum with multiple languages represented in the text, and a fan on the ceiling, brown walls, and I don't know, some kind of fabric wall hanging in the background as well. So I'm the executive director of Pittsburghers for Public Transit. We are a grassroots union of transit riders and transit workers organizing for expanded, more affordable, more accessible public transit here in Allegheny County. Although our work of late, but also over the last several years, has taken us statewide. And so we've been organizing also for transit that moves all communities across Pennsylvania, especially through the state budget. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Laura. Elisa.
Hi, everyone. Once again, I am Elisa Grishman, she, her pronouns. For people who missed it earlier, I am a fat white woman with brown curly hair and a black t-shirt that says less pity, more ramps. And I have a light blue wall behind me with a couple of paintings and a cat tree. And we may or may not be graced with a cat at some point during the evening. We'll find out. So I am the founder and director of Access Mob Pittsburgh. Um, we are a disability advocacy organization in Pittsburgh that's dedicated to creating change for uh, people with disabilities and the currently abled who may one day become disabled, using economic incentives, education, positive change. We seek to normalize disability and help people really recognize that it is just a typical, standard, normal part of life and not some big, scary thing that can't be talked about. And so, we try to do things like organize events like this, help people join committees. We do a lot of work with other groups for sidewalk advocacy, for transit advocacy, basically any part of life that exists, disability is a part of it, and we want to be there to, shine and have fun. So, yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa, and thank you to your team for putting this together tonight. We really appreciate you. Cassandra, you are up.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. My name is Cassandra Masters. I am a white woman with long brown hair. I'm wearing a navy and white striped t-shirt, and my background is also intentionally blurry. I'm in the midst of moving, so it's a mess behind me, so it's blurry. I am the associate director with Age Friendly Greater Pittsburgh. We are committed to making the region more inclusive and respectful of all ages, in the way that Elisa just said, and the disability community says that we are all currently able-bodied. Many of us, can all one day become disabled. We also at Age Friendly say that we're all aging. We will all one day be older. And Age Friendly is really dedicated to fighting the stigma around aging and fear of aging. And a lot of our work is combating ageism. And we know that ageism intersects with ableism in so many ways. So excited to have this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Cassandra. Now we're going to get into it. So the first question that I have for our panelists is, what does the week without driving mean to you? And I am going to do what we call a popcorn method, where I randomly select people to answer the question. So Laura, we are going to start with you. And again, the question is, what does the week without driving mean to you?
Great. Yeah, thank you, Deja, and thank you for the other panelists for sharing that great perspective. I think before I talk about the week without driving, I want to talk about the frame that Anna Ziverts and the Disability Rights Washington has created that I think is so important. I want to say I love the term non-driver, which was introduced to me through this advocacy week. I think it creates such an important solidaristic frame that crosses so many demographics, right? Around ability, around class and economic status, around age, immigration status, that really allows us to have empathy for folks that are different from ourselves, but also identifies like a common set of needs and demands. And so for us at Pittsburghers for Public Transit, it's been a real joy to take this opportunity to really build deeper relationships with these co-hosting partners, and to take the opportunity to identify organizational supporters that serve or represent the communities that are under this frame of non-driver. I think also it's really important that the fact that 30% of our neighbors and friends are non-drivers by definition means that it's a constituency too big to be ignored. And so I think that that's why elected officials are moved to take part in this, in part. So that's my reflection on just the concept of non-drivers. But I think from that baseline, I think it's been really profound to highlight how there are such inequities in the realities of transportation access, like in the speed, efficiency, in safety and comfort and dignity for non-drivers versus drivers. That's really powerful. And we use this to highlight the stories of non-drivers and with the invitation to take the pledge to not drive for a week for those who currently do. I think regardless of whether or not people participate, even just asking the questions of could you or would you do this really forces people to pause and consider how their trips, how taking trips as a non-driver could be challenging. And every time that somebody does take that pause around participating, those are barriers that sort of are daylighted in the experience of everyday non-drivers. I think the last thing I would say, and I also appreciate that there's a focus on and calling to action elected officials having this experience that non-drivers have every day. I am very much a believer in action. Like, what are the things we are fighting for? And not merely illustrating or spotlighting people's hardships. I really love that the Week Without Driving challenges us and elected officials to identify opportunities for change.
Thank you, Laura. Now I am going to have Cassandra ask the question, which is, what does the Week Without Driving mean to you?
Sure. I was thinking about this question earlier, and so much about what Age Friendly does is amplifying the older adult voice. Older adults are so often left out of the conversation in budget meetings, community planning. Similarly with people with disabilities, that perspective is just left out of the ways that we design our communities. And so the Week Without Driving this year especially, I have been thinking a lot about the times many decades ago, but not too far away, of mass institutionalization of our disabled and older neighbors, where if you were deemed not independent enough, quote unquote, not independent enough, you were in a separate facility away from your community, and just that was your whole life. Your whole world was in that institution. We've made so much progress on home and community-based services, and now with so much uncertainty with federal funding and threats to Medicaid, that is up in the air, and we will all lose when we don't invest in those community-based services. And community-based services really only thrive when you can have non-car options, so people can get to all the things that make their life meaningful and joyful. I also am thinking about, for older adults specifically, our sidewalk infrastructure is not good, especially in Pittsburgh. And there was a study recently in Allegheny County where people asked older adults what causes the biggest fear of falling, which is a very common thing that happens with older adults as we age. Our agility and our balance just deteriorates often. The biggest thing that causes a fear of falling is walking outside on sidewalks. It's not falling in the shower, it's not falling in your kitchen. And of course, those are worrisome, but it's falling on the sidewalks. And if you have that fear, you're probably not going to want to walk. And then you're not going to be able to access your community unless you are able to drive. And we know so many of our neighbors are not able to drive. So those are things that I'm centering this year, especially for Week Without Driving.
Thank you, Cassandra. That was actually really informative about the study. I really appreciate you sharing that. All right, Elisa, we are going to go to you next.
Oh, echoing so much of what Cassandra said. I I only got into disability advocacy in the first place because of issues that I was having with sidewalks. I now use a power wheelchair, but before then, I used a walker, and I had several instances of almost flipping over, getting the wheels of my walker stuck in sidewalk cracks. And to get around anywhere. Even, public transit is wonderful, but if you can't get from your house to the public transit stop because of bad sidewalks or lack of sidewalks, that's hugely problematic. So that's one aspect of Week Without Driving that's so important to me is, advocating for the closing of gaps in sidewalk infrastructure in transit networks. Because for so many people with different types of disabilities, you think of someone who's blind, low vision, who, can't see obstructions in the sidewalk or has trouble, with the grassy lot where, there should be a sidewalk, you know, closing those gaps is so important. Um, there's also, I'm a public transit rider in part by choice, and I have an enormous amount of privilege that I live in an area with public transit access. Um, there's so many people with disabilities who can't afford to drive, who can't drive, disability is the minority group that's the most likely to live in poverty. I'm on SSDI. I couldn't afford a car if I wanted to. And, you know, being able to elevate the experiences of people in those situations and talk about the need for better public transit, for better sidewalk infrastructure, all these things, that this is why the Week Without Driving was started in the first place. And, we just need to go from there. And uh I could go on for 5 hours. I don't want to, but this is one of the most important events of the year for disability because, you know, if you can't get out of your house, you know, what's the point? So yeah, I'll stop there before I ramble for too long.
No, you're not rambling. Thank you so much, Elisa. All right, Seth, I'm going to kick it off to you. And I just want a reminder that the question is, what does the Week Without Driving mean to you?
Yeah, thanks. I'm gonna start from a personal place, which is that my mom is blind, and she's been blind since before I was born. And so um, growing up, we had some struggles. My dad worked all day pretty far away, so he couldn't come home if, I needed to get picked up at school, or when we went school shopping for school supplies or groceries for dinner or what have you. We had to figure out, okay, how are we gonna get there? And I remember the stress that my mother experienced trying to figure that out, and we sometimes had to miss out on opportunities that my friends were getting to have because we couldn't get to where we needed to go. And there's that piece. And then there's the flip side of that, or another piece to it, which is um, the moments I get to have with my mom walking places. A tradition that we had, and we still kind of have sometimes, is I'll hold her hand. And growing up, we delivered this little system where, okay, if there's an obstacle on the sidewalk, I would just turn her hand a little bit, and we would kind of follow in the direction that I was turning her. I would squeeze if we need to stop because maybe there's a low hanging branch. And we were really privileged and fortunate to grow up in a town that had really good walking infrastructure, although there were still a lot of issues. And translating that to Week Without Driving is that it's an opportunity to cultivate empathy for the very surprising, perhaps, amount of people who rely on other modes of travel, such as biking, walking, taking the bus. Um, and and so all of these modes require good street design, right? And infrastructure to be safe, accessible, enjoyable. We call them complete streets that aren't just designed for cars going fast, but for people moving at people speed. That includes bus shelters, quality sidewalks, protected bike lanes, intersections designed for people, and more. And it's also an opportunity, Week Without Driving, to have some meaningful conversations together, to take a hard look at the impacts of car dependence on our communities, and then to look at the possibilities, like the joy that I get to have when I get to walk around with my mom and have just the best conversations that we might not get to have, if we're speeding around or what have you. We might just have less time together, right? And I think if we can get out of our car brain, Week Without Driving invites us to do this, challenges us to do this. For those who drive like me, I do drive, quite a bit sometimes, and it invites us to slow down a little bit, to take a look at our communities and ask the question of what if we design this differently? How could our lives actually be better if our streets worked for everyone getting around at human speed? Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you to all of our panelists for answering that question. We're now going to move on to the next question. Just keep it rolling. So our next question is, it's a little longer, just so you know. What misconceptions do you hear when talking about your constituency, those you serve or represent? And what are some stereotypes or assumptions about those who can't or don't drive? And for this one, I'm going to start with Elisa.
So for me, the biggest misconception that I hear about disability is that when you become disabled, your life ends. There's this notion that people who are disabled are helpless. We stay at home all day, swoon on my fainting couch, with just nothing going on. And absolutely nothing could be further from the truth. I think that I've got a better life since I've become disabled because I've become part of so many wonderful communities. For all that I use a power wheelchair, still go out and do stuff. I visit friends. I go to the movies. I grocery shop on my own. And, you know, I can't tell you how often I've heard from folks, look at you getting out on your own. Good for you. And I, it, it's a sad reality of just, everyone is surprised and finds me inspirational for getting out of my own house. And so, I think for a lot of people with disabilities, that patronizing, that infantilizing can be very frustrating, especially when it comes from elected officials who don't recognize that their policies really are affecting autonomous human beings who participate in society in meaningful ways, economic ways. Uh, that we hear about all the arguments for public transit as one example right now, and funding public transit and a lot of rural areas. uh, the elected officials will just say, well, we really don't use public transit, and they don't realize that uh, senior rides and paratransit for people with disabilities in their counties, in their communities, is a form of public transit that they're funding. But because there's this perception that when you're disabled, you don't have a life, they don't fight for us to continue to have active lives in our communities. And so, that's kind of a stereotype of, people with disabilities who don't or can't drive. It's, that helplessness and that not deserving of access to sidewalks and public transit, because what kind of life could you possibly have if you're disabled? Uh, I say this very sarcastically. I just, it, it's so frustrating. And I try to very much be an example of, look at me. I'm having this great life. I want good sidewalks. Uh I want, public transit. So that's the biggest one that we hear in the disability community. I'm sure if you asked any person with a disability, they will have a different answer. And, this is true, but you know, I deserve having a good life.
Yeah, thank you. I especially really love the part where you talk about how becoming disabled has helped you become a part of communities. And that is beautiful. I feel the same way as a disabled person. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. Seth, I am going to go to you now. Would you like me to repeat the question or do you got it?
Yeah, just so we can hear it one more time. That would be
All
good.
right, sounds good. What misconceptions do you hear when talking about those you represent, your constituency? And what are some stereotypes or assumptions about those who can't or don't drive that you hear?
Yeah, okay, cool. Um, so I think two come to mind. The first one in terms of misconception is for people who are thinking about, oh, a week without driving or not driving, is that they can't possibly do it. And the human brain is kind of funny sometimes, wherein we get this idea in our head and we get really attached to it, and we don't actually think a couple steps further and challenge that idea. And so, here's this misconception that, oh, I just couldn't possibly get where I needed to go without driving. And yet people haven't really sat down, opened up Google Maps, opened up the transit app, looked at the Pittsburgh bike map. They haven't looked at, all sorts of just possibilities for getting out around without a car. And they might be right. They might be right that it's actually really hard, and for whatever reason, it might be not be doable for them. But most people are surprised when they actually take a look at what is possible. And then when you start that conversation, you just naturally start to think about, oh, well, maybe I could get there this way, and wouldn't it be nice if it was better? And I think that's a really useful advocacy conversation to have, which is what I think is really great about Week Without Driving. So that's one. Oh, I couldn't possibly do it. Well, challenge yourself. Maybe you can. And it might be easier than you expect. And two, that it's a struggle. It's always a struggle to get around without a car. And that might be a stereotype too, that people without cars are always struggling. They're always having a hard time. They're always huffing and puffing if they're on a bike, or wet if they're, in the rain, or, poor, or disabled, and that's a struggle, and all this talk about struggle when we think about getting around without a car. And yeah, okay, so sometimes it is a struggle. There might even be struggles in every single trip, from bad smells to the rain to the bus not coming to popping a chain on your bike or a flat tire. Like, yeah, so struggles happen. But joy happens too, right? Beautiful things happen in every trip. Moving at human speed produces opportunities to connect with other people, right? To smell the flowers, to feel the sunshine on your skin, to just have these moments of delight and beauty that we don't get when we're in a metal, cage and glass. And so I invite people to think about, consider the ratio of struggling to joy might actually fall on the side of joy more often when you're getting around without a car, and on the side of struggle more often when driving, because cars are expensive, and cars break down, and we have to miss a day of work to take them to the mechanic, and they're dangerous and kind of scary death machines. And they produce a lot of struggle for other people when we're getting around in a car. Not the least of which is the air emissions. But then we have some dangerous drivers, even when we think we're really good at driving, right? So it produces struggles for other people, not just ourselves. And getting around without a car, yeah, it can be a struggle sometimes, but it can also be pretty great. So I challenge people to think about those misconceptions and maybe look at it a different way.
Thank
Can
you,
I
Seth.
ask, what
Oh,
what
yes.
misconceptions do people have about cyclists?
Uh, the one that came up recently on Facebook is, oh, cyclists don't pay taxes. They don't pay into our infrastructure, da 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 da. And meanwhile, like, actually, gas tax goes mostly into highways and uh, uh, modes of transportation that people walking and biking don't often get to use. Oh my gosh, honestly, for some reason that cyclists are, uh, the hills. You couldn't possibly you must be exhausted the whole time, or you're some super fit athletic person if you're getting around in the city. Like, I'm not a super fit athletic person, and I got an e-bike and I love it. um, and I could name more, but those are two that are coming to mind right away. It is surprisingly doable, and we would love to teach you how if you feel interested in riding a bike. That's something that we specialize at Bike Pittsburgh is bringing the joy and uh, learning how in a way that feels safe and empowering.
Thank you. I was actually going to thank you for bringing up joy, the joy of mobility and being able to get around. And wouldn't it be great if we were all able to get around everywhere in our city and in our county and in our state without these issues? I think that the struggle comes from the ineptitude of our system not providing for us. So thank you so much for that. And Cassandra, I am now going to go to you. I will repeat the question. What misconceptions do you hear when talking about your constituency? That is, those that you represent or serve. And what are some stereotypes or assumptions about those who can't or don't drive that you hear?
Yeah, following the sort of thread of joy with when people talk about older adults and mobility and how they get around, it so often turns to the conversation of what rides are necessary, what trips are necessary versus what are not necessary. And oftentimes it's that medical trips are necessary. And of course, medical appointments are very important, but no one wakes up in the morning and is like, wow, I can't wait to go to my doctor's appointment today. Like, that's just like not the highlight of someone's day for the most part, unless you're going to get really good medical news. I don't know. But how we think about what is an essential trip or what is something that absolutely needs to be supported and funded in so many different ways needs to go beyond just doctor's appointments and pharmacy visits. I think about my grandmother, who I'm a caregiver for my grandmother who lives in Armstrong County. Elisa mentioned rural transit systems being really impacted by these budget conversations and proposed cuts. My grandma has been living alone at her house for 20 some years since my grandfather passed. And the past 4 or 5 years, the only time she leaves the house is to go to a doctor's appointment. She doesn't get to go to her friend's house to play cards anymore. She had like this like posse of women she played cards with every Tuesday. She hasn't been able to do that. She doesn't get to go to the grocery store by herself to pick out the like exact loaf of bread that she wants, right? Because there's not enough transportation options for her because she can't drive. So much the conversation around what kind of trips are we funding and what kind of investments are we making for older adults comes down to medical needs, which of course is important. And I'm not saying they're not important. And I really want people to understand that medical appointments are not the fulfilling thing to our lives as much as being able to go to the farmer's market, family reunion, seeing a movie, going to a community organizing meeting. That is what makes life feel fulfilling and joyful. And I think any trip is a trip of necessity if it means people being able to access their community.
Thank you. Laura, would you like me to repeat the question? I didn't
No.
think so. I know you.
Well, I appreciate following all of these other insights. I think that I'll piggyback off of a lot of what has been shared. I think, especially around the statewide organizing fight around the state transit budget, the week without driving and thinking about 30% of our communities as sort of being categorically non-drivers, it really frames out the stakes around the conversation of funding transit everywhere, right? In all 67 communities or counties, there is some form of public transit that exists. But there are some in our state legislature that would say only urban communities, only Pittsburgh and Philly have transit. That's what we're paying for. Why should our tax money go there? And part of what they're saying is true, right? Like we have made a choice in this state that we provide whatever, some modicum of public transit in Pittsburgh and Philly. But they're also making a choice not to fund it in their own communities, right? And if their communities are like ours, which they are, where 30% of their communities at a minimum are non-drivers, they're just choosing for them to have no options and having people be unable to age in place or access their communities. I think one of the other things I just want to highlight is that there's this perception that our members or that our constituency of transit riders really should and can only hope to settle for maintaining what we have, and that the goal is to fight for, not making things worse, and that any option is a good option because non-drivers have no other choices, that the bus is really just a place of last resort. And I think implied in that is the idea that our time doesn't matter, that our comfort doesn't matter, that it's good enough to have any service is fine even if it's slow or unreliable, or there's no accessible way to get to and from our stops to our destinations. But I think what is wrong about that is that in my community of transit riders, right, and workers, that our constituency is really not here to settle for a broken status quo. And that I think we have collectively a lot of vision that we're bringing to it. And that's why I think the fight for public transit has always been at the vanguard of civil rights and human rights struggles. I think about the Gang of 19 in Denver, who laid down in front of buses to make them accessible in the late 70s, which really paved the way for the passage of the ADA. I think about Claudette Colvin and Rosa Parks and the year-long Montgomery bus boycott with thousands and thousands of families that found other ways to get around for a year. And I think about, even immigrant organizing across borders and abolitionist prison organizing, because what we are doing is bigger than a set of negotiations around a state budget or the fight to win fair fares even, or the removal of bus stops like in the waterfront situation. Like what we are fundamentally talking about is the freedom to move as a human right. And it really pains me that Elisa says that she has an enormous amount of privilege in having access to the bus. I think that collectively we are committed to fighting for palaces for the people, right? Like for public luxuries. And so I hope that when we win, and at least as we continue to advance towards this ideal, it'll be clear that transit is not just for non-drivers, but really for everyone.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, folks, we're going to go on to our next question. And the next question is, what are ways that people who can't give up driving can meaningfully participate in the week without driving? And Cassandra, I'm actually going to start with you.
I think just imagining it. I think I think what Seth said earlier about just like really empathizing with someone who can't drive or is choosing not to drive or doesn't drive. We are so stuck in what we do now and what we see as possible that we can't even like envision a different world where we're moving at human speed and we're moving at a level where we're making eye contact with everyone around us on the sidewalk or on bikes or on the bus. And I think we all, as neighbors in this very confusing political moment, really need to be more creative and more empathetic, and really just envision our communities not as places to like get through, but to get to, and to really understand that our communities are destinations in and of themselves. I think talking to your neighbors who can't drive or don't drive, and supporting your neighbors who can't. I mean, yes, there is so much joy in slower alternative modes of transit, and all these modes that aren't cars can be so dehumanizing sometimes. And I think drivers, if someone is standing at a bus stop in the pouring rain with like 10 bags of groceries, maybe you say like, where are you headed? And I'll give you a ride if you know them, So I think supporting your neighbors who can't, understanding that we have so much more work to do to invest in non-driving options, but until we get there, we have to support the neighbors who are in this every day.
Thank you, Cassandra. To repeat the question, what are ways that people who can't give up driving can meaningfully participate in the week without driving? And Elisa, I'm going to hand it to you.
Anyone can become disabled at any point in their life, regardless of age, sex, gender, socioeconomic status, religion. It can happen to anyone. And I strongly encourage people to start advocating for creating more accessible communities while they're still abled, so that the world is ready for them when they, if and when they become disabled. And a huge part of that is joining organizations in your community that are seeking to make improvements. You don't have to be currently disabled to join a disability related organization. You know, we still want you. Also, reaching out your elected officials, and I don't just mean your congressional reps, I don't even mean necessarily your state reps. Reaching out to your local representatives, going to county council meetings, going to your city council and saying, "Hi, my name is Bob. I live in my house. I want to age in place. I want to be able to keep living in my house if I become disabled. Please make these improvements to my neighborhood. Please fight for public transit for us. Please, fix the sidewalks, start doing that now so it's ready for you when you need it." I think that's so important. And, attending events like this and spreading the word and, yeah, I think that's the most important thing that anyone can do.
Thank you. Now I am going to go to you, Laura, and to repeat the question, what are ways that people who can't give up driving can meaningfully participate in the week without driving?
Yeah, I think I'll start by saying that I just really appreciate how thoughtful Anna Ziverts and the Week America Walks and all of those the leaders and the national campaign for transit justice have been in conceiving of this challenge. I love the generosity and compassion that's really shown in the way that the Week Without Driving is framed, right? Like um, uh, it's not accusatory. It's not about shaming anybody. It's also not, there's not really a competition, right? It just poses a question, and it's clear-eyed about the challenges. I think that part of that question is like, yes, can you change your behavior for a week? But also, can you do it for one day? Or what about one trip, right? And then consider what privileges you have that allow you to make one choice over another. So I just want to, you know, complicate, Deja, your question just to say, I think that almost everyone can participate in some way, right? Even if you don't participate for the whole week. Um, I don't think this is the right answer to the question, but I think that just want to flag that I don't want to focus entirely on drivers. I think that non-drivers, I just want to flag all the ways that you can participate too. And I think that you're just as important or maybe more important in this, because this is a moment in which you're given permission, and not only permission, but you are really encouraged to tell your stories. And we want to show the world that your experience matters. And really for you to think too and imagine what it would be like for your experience to be different and easier, and then be part of a community of people that's putting forward the solutions and calling on elected officials to be part of those implementing those solutions as well. And so I just want to flag on our website on weekwithoutdrivingpgh.org, there's both a place for non-drivers and drivers to participate, for non-drivers to share your story, to be part of the group thinking about or calling on an organization maybe that you're part of to amplify your story, other people's stories, and to put pressure on elected officials to enact some real changes. And then if you are a driver, think about it, starting with one trip and then go from there.
Thank you, Laura. Seth, I am going to pass it to you and I'm going to repeat the question. What are ways that people who can't give up driving can meaningfully participate in the week without driving? Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to ask yourself three questions. One, why? Why can't I go without driving? Not as a self-judgment, but as a way to really think about it, right? What are the obstacles that are making it so that I can't get where I need to go without driving? What are the challenges? And then who in my community might face similar challenges, but then be doing it anyway, right? But we're not having driving available as an option, I should say. Who's facing those challenges and are nevertheless getting to work on the bus, biking, walking to school, to the grocery store, etc. But facing those obstacles that are getting in your way, and what's an action that you can take that can reduce those obstacles? And we already have heard a menu of some of those. I think Cassandra pointed earlier to go help your neighbors, find out those people, and find out if there's a way that you can respectfully ask if there's a way you can help, carry the groceries. Of course, donate to one or more of our organizations to help us help your neighbors and work on reducing those obstacles. Even better, become a member, sustain our work, join our community of advocates, right? Whether that's through money or also with your volunteering, your time, your strategic insight, right? We need that. We need to know what you know about your community. Of course, reach out to elected officials, get involved in your local government. I'll make a plug also for get involved with our Safe Sidewalks crew. This is a project of Pittsburgh Walks, which is this really awesome coalition group that all of the panelists here are a part of in some way or another, taking a look at how do we systemically address the pretty severe issues with our walking accessibility and safety within the city of Pittsburgh. And this project, the Safe Sidewalks crew, is looking at gathering data about the quality and accessibility of every single sidewalk in the city to help us make better decisions about where we invest our resources and find some better solutions to addressing really the severely chronic systemic problems of busted up sidewalks all over the city or missing sidewalks all over the city. So we have a training for that on Thursday on Pitt's campus at Posivar Hall on that events page that has already showed up in the chat. There will be many more of these trainings, so you can check out pittsburghwalks.org. I've been very excited and glad to spend a big chunk of my time at Bike Pittsburgh supporting that work, and I hope you'll be part of it because it's really cool what we're up to. And come to our other events. We've got a lot of good stuff this week. And then, of course, just go for a bike or a walk. You are literally doing activism, advocacy by going for a walk in your neighborhood, going for a bike in your neighborhood, going for a roll in your neighborhood, because you're just actually using that public infrastructure that we're advocating for and helping everybody make the case that it needs to be better.
Thank you. And thank you for saying donate and, not just saying donate your money, but donate your time, donate your abilities, but yes, donate your money as well to these wonderful organizations and people who do the work and show up for us every day. Now we have arrived at our last question before we take questions from the audience. So the last question is, moving forward, what do you see Week Without Driving contributing to your constituency? And I am going to start with Cassandra.
I think there is for people who do drive and then they reach a point in their life, whether it's due to disability as they get older, or they move somewhere that isn't super, or like they move somewhere and they don't really need a car. I think people are afraid of living a world where they don't have their car. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. People are afraid of what losing the convenience of driving means. They're afraid of relying on maybe their own body, their bike, a bus. They're afraid of being dependent on other things in their community. And I think driving really pushes people to be super independent and individualistic, and people are afraid of that. They're afraid of trying to navigate a world where they're out in community more and more. And I think for older people, there is a fear of what their life will be without being able to drive. And I hope that there are more conversations that Age Friendly can have with older drivers and older non-drivers, to be like, my life did not end when I decided to stop driving, or I decided to sell my car because I wasn't able to afford it. I think some people see not being able to drive as a sentence to staying at home, and we know that that's not true so long as we invest in alternative modes of transit. So I think just talking about that fear and highlighting the stories of people who don't drive and the way that they're able to access their communities in a lot of different ways. And another thing I think about is how a lot of people, as they get older, will sometimes move to communities that aren't super walkable, or they don't have great transit access because they just assume that they'll always be able to drive. But as you know, as we all age, our ability to drive might change slightly, or our desire to drive might change slightly. But a lot of times people find themselves in areas where they're not able to get around or access their communities unless they have a car. So I think being a little bit more forward thinking and thinking about, like, would I want to live here if I didn't have a car? Is this a place that I could be up until my 90s? How would it support me as I get older? How would it support me if I am a caregiver for my grandkid and I have to be pushing them around in a stroller? Could I access this community without a car? And I think the more we can have those conversations, the more proactive we can be, and the more I think, like, the less painful these kinds of transitions can be in our life. Everyone sort of has to go through these different transitions as we get older, and our priorities change and our access to things change. And the more we can think forward on what we might want, the better.
Thanks, Cassandra. Seth, I am going to go to you. And the question is, moving forward, what do you see Week Without Driving contributing to your constituency?
Yeah, I think the storytelling element, and especially the storytelling that shines a light on the diversity of people who get around as non-drivers. And from my perspective, our constituency, people who get around on a bike, right? Elisa asked earlier, like, oh, what are some stereotypes as well about bicyclists? One of them has come to mind, which is like, oh, bicyclists are all entitled young punks, you know, who could get around with some other way and just choose to get around with a bike and get in our way, and you know, da 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 da. That's not true. You know, we know that there are a lot of people who rely on being able to get around on a bicycle, especially with the advent of our Pogo bike share system. People have really come to rely on that as a core element of their way of getting to work, to the grocery store, to school, around school. I think if you look at our social media right now, you'll see one of our story highlights about Week Without Driving is Lauren Apt from Critical Mass, talking about how much families are using their bicycles to get around this city, and the benefits that come along with that, and the necessity that both the necessity and opportunity that provides to families getting around on bikes. I think e-bikes have been just transformative for so many families. Now you see people being able to get around. I know Laura's one of them, with their kiddos on the back of the bike, and that's huge, so that families are not needing to spend so much money on their cars, are being able to get places they might not be able to go otherwise. So just that storytelling is key. The other thing I just want to say is it helps our constituency at Bike Pittsburgh when we get to partner with the rad people who are here on this panel right now. I think Week Without Driving has been such an amazing opportunity for our organizations to learn how to work together and collaborate and generate some new ideas. There are 100% some projects, campaigns that and ways of working together that have stemmed out of this Week Without Driving, and now we have 60 plus organizations all over the city that are joining us in that, and we're finding ways to work with them too, and seeing the connections that we might not have seen before. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you, Seth. I'm now going to go to Laura. And again, the question is, moving forward, what do you see Week Without Driving contributing to your constituency? Laura?
Cool. Yeah, I think I'm not sure that I have too much more that hasn't already been said. I do want to echo what Seth was sharing about how meaningful it is to be part of this group of co-hosts, and to think uh, strategically, creatively about how we can collaborate, and then call on elected officials to work towards our shared ends. I think it is really amazing that 60 plus organizations have joined this effort too. And I think collectively, we're really especially focusing on how municipal leaders that oftentimes feel like they don't have much of a role in the very small municipalities outside of the city of Pittsburgh, can begin to take action to support non-drivers too. Because I think that there's a lot of need to make our smaller municipality, the hundreds of smaller municipalities outside of the cities of Pittsburgh, safer and more accessible for non-drivers. And so I think that the call to action for them specifically has been really profound, and we're going to continue to work towards growing that community. I also just think that having like a week of action, right? Like a time, a moment in time in which this happens, and it happens every year, that we can focus elected officials' attention on, helps us have I think we call it like an inflection point where it's like, this is the moment where the thing has to be done so that you can talk about it then. Helps us to move forward efforts that we've been having ongoing for a while. So, last week we were able to talk about the progress on Allegheny Go and the low income fare program. Tomorrow, I'm excited at the press conference. We're going to hear a great big announcement from the city of Pittsburgh. And it also happens to be the day that the city's draft budget is dropped. And so it was a great opportunity to be like, we want some real improvements in the budget for non-drivers. Go. um, um, and the last thing I'll say is just that I think the other thing that Week Without Driving has done for our constituency, and any constituency, just the public in general, is that it plugs more people into our efforts, and it allows people to pilot what it's like to be a non-driver. And oftentimes, once you do it once, it becomes a lot easier to do it more going forward. So I'll say that.
Thank you. And thank you for mentioning the municipalities. There's over 300 in Allegheny County. And we don't want to forget about those people, as Cassandra was saying, who move outside of the city, who also do not have access to sidewalks and transit. So I just wanted to highlight that really quickly. That's something that is very near and dear to my heart. Talk to your county council people, as Elisa was saying, talk to your borough managers, your commissioners, all those folks, because not everyone is inside of the city to be able to talk to the mayor and their staff. So that is something that I encourage you all to look into or to reach out about. And then lastly, Elisa, I will have you answer the last question, which is, moving forward, what do you see Week Without Driving contributing to your constituency or those you serve?
Thank you. So Cassandra summed up so much of what I would have said. There's so much overlap between the needs of the aging community and the disability community, just different ages. But the Week Without Driving started as a disability issue, but got picked up by everyone else as the realization grew that the things that apply to disabled people apply to everyone. And I really, in the future, I see Week Without Driving being a stepping stone to other events and other things, being not just about one community, but all of us. Because, there's this concept called universal design that I'm sure most people on this call are familiar with. But for those who aren't, the whole idea is that if it's built for people with disabilities, anyone can use it. the curb cuts that we have on the end of each corner of each block, they're built so that people with wheelchairs can get off and on the sidewalk. But it's also great for kids on roller skates or adults in roller skates too, or people in bikes, people with shopping carts, people with strollers. It's not, it's a disability thing that can be used by everyone. And so the Week Without Driving is a disability founded event that applies to everyone. And so I see this helping us tremendously in the future because it has already brought the bike uh public transit, disability, aging communities, and the 60 plus organizations have all come together, and I see this as a great way for continued representation, continued awareness of disability issues, the continued normalization of what disability means in one's life, and the continued understanding of the interconnectedness of everyone. So yeah, that's I see Week Without Driving as being a wonderful thing for everyone.
Thank you. I think that was such a great way to end this panel. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I think you said so many things that I'm sure resonated with all of our communities. And thank you for the work that you do every day for our communities as well. I sincerely mean that. I know I'm very monotone, but I, I sincerely mean thank you so much. And now I'm going to open up the floor to any questions from the audience. If we don't get to all of your questions, you can email your questions to accessmobpittsburgh@gmail.com. If you want to ask a question now, you can either raise your hand or type your question in the chat. If you would like to ask a question in ASL, please also use the raise your hand function and wave on your screen so that the interpreters may find you. For people who came in late and need help with this, Katie is putting the link to our technical page into our chat now. And now we will be taking questions from the audience. Okay, I see John, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Well, first of all, I'd like to compliment the panel. It was an excellent panel discussion. And I also agree with Laura that it's not us against them, although conversations we have on different sides of the political spectrum is a little bit different. How the one party looks at transit and the other doesn't look at it as more of a human right. And the other thing of it is, and I think this goes to a point that Cassandra made and even Alyssa made, was that when I quit driving over 15 years ago, I didn't die. In other words, I was able to continue my life. And the other point, and just one last point with Cassandra, before the Rural Shared Ride program for people with disabilities was developed, the conversation we had about neighbors helping neighbors, trying to identify people with accessible vans that could help each other out. So that's also an option. So ride share. So those are just the comments. But again, very good discussion. Thank you very much for having this, Lisa.
Do we have any comments in the chat? Well, if anyone wants to think of a question, I will just take a moment to plug some of the events coming up this week. As you saw earlier in the chat, if you go to weekwithoutdrivingpgh.org, there is an events tab up on the top. I see a question coming in. We will get to it in just a moment. But just to plug some of the events, we have a press conference tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at the portico at the City County building. Everyone, we would love to have lots of people there. Please note that if you are unable to climb stairs, you will have to go in through the entrance on the Ross side of the building. There's a ramp, or Ross Street side of the building. There's a ramp up to the entryway there, and you go through the building and across again. We have a river, oh gosh, what is it called? River Life? River Life event on Wednesday evening. Thursday evening is the Safe Sidewalks crew training, and Friday evening we have a happy hour. More information is about those in the events page. And then Katie, I will let you read off the questions from the chat.
Giving it a moment. From Donna, what are some good ways to take action after the week is over?
Any one of our panelists can answer this question.
I'll put in right there, and in the emails that I send out to everyone after this presentation, and also on the description for the YouTube, I will put all these links. But all of the organizations that are here tonight, we have mailing lists, we have donations pages, but the big thing is we have mailing lists and other events that we do. Go to our web pages and sign up for events and find out what else we're doing, and get involved, because we do a lot of, all of us do stuff throughout the year that's related to continuing people's ability to get around without driving. It's not just about this week. Anyone else want to plug anything?
Yeah, if I may, Bike Pittsburgh supports a network of independent neighborhood advocacy groups that are working for complete streets, for safe streets, for everybody to be able to get around, walking, biking, rolling, getting to the bus even. And I know a number of these groups also end up plugging in with Pittsburghers for Public Transit and other organizations. If I may, I'd love to put a link in the chat so that people can see our listing of these neighborhood groups, because you might not know that one exists in your community, and you can go to their meeting or get on their email list and find opportunities to advocate. Somebody mentioned the capital budget earlier. That is one of the best ways we have to advocate for the hard infrastructure change that we want to see, because if we're going to change the concrete and the way the streets are designed, we need money to do it, and the city needs to write it into their budget. This is something that these neighborhood advocacy groups work on every single year, and something that Bike Pittsburgh helps coach and train neighborhood groups to engage with. So that is a great way to do it. Elise, do you mind if I put that link in the chat?
If you are able to, go ahead and do that, and then also send it to me and I will email it out to everyone.
Great.
Next question, Katie.
How are your organizations supporting people who are immunocompromised? Much of the discussion around public transit involves doing things that involve shared air.
That is a very hard but good question. I know at least for Access Mob, our events are, at the moment just all online. So, we try to have events like this relating to how to advocate, online on Zoom. But I don't have much of an answer beyond that. I don't know if anyone else has a good answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, I will just echo that with Pittsburghers for Public Transit, we do all of our events, almost all of our events, hybrid or virtual, so that there's an option for people to participate from home. And while this does involve some shared air, I will say that a huge part of the state budget fight and the fight to prevent service cuts was really centered on the fact that paratransit services were going to be impacted even more severely than fixed route transit loss. So the cuts to access were proposed at 62%. And we know that shared ride services statewide are actually more at risk than, again, the fixed route bus service or trolley or train service. So, and their funding, at least some of it, comes through the same mechanism. And so, if that's of interest in some way that folks that are immunocompromised are able to get around, then that's something that we're definitely invested in fighting for.
And Thank you, Laura. We have about 5 more minutes for questions, and there are some more questions in the chat. Katie, if you would like to read the next one.
The next one. Question. In Pennsylvania, if I recall correctly, sidewalks are usually owned by private property owners rather than something a municipality or city can manage. Is anyone taking steps to try and make sidewalks more serviceable by local government?
Seth, if we were on a game show, you rang the bell. What's up?
Happy for anybody to chime in. This one's so tricky and something that I've been thinking about a lot. You do recall correctly that sidewalks are owned by private property owners. There are some programs that the city of Pittsburgh has been piloting. One in particular is providing kind of a carrot stick method where they identify a stretch of sidewalk on a block or two that is in desperate need of repairs, and they say, all right, homeowners, we're going to give you this opportunity to, because homeowners still have to pay for those sidewalks. The city can't do it for them, but makes it really easy for the homeowners to do it, getting access to much more affordable fixing of their sidewalks, replacement of their sidewalks by all going in together, and then providing a financial vehicle essentially by allowing that homeowner to pay off the cost at a pretty low rate over a long period of time via a lien on their house. There's more that you can look into. I'm happy to answer questions if you email me, advocacy@bikepgh.org. But the bottom line is, if we wanted to have our municipalities basically socialize sidewalks and take responsibility for them, we would need legislation passed at the state level to enable us to do that. The city of Denver has done a really cool thing where they have people pay, I think, like $200 a year, essentially, a fee, and the city then takes care of all the sidewalks in the city, and that ends up being a pretty good deal if you need your sidewalk fixed. So yeah, it's really hard. It's probably the biggest barrier to actually getting consistently good quality sidewalks in our city, and it's a problem across the whole country. It's not unique to Pittsburgh.
Cassandra? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, Cassandra, go ahead.
I'll just add to there's the condition of the sidewalk because of concrete, and we're also approaching winter, and snowy, icy sidewalks present such a huge challenge. There's a few things that I recommend. One, if you are able to, there's a program called Snow Angels that the city runs that pairs you with someone who's not able to shovel their sidewalk, and then you go out and shovel it when it snows, and that is just a way to be a good neighbor, and they'll pair you with someone nearby. I also would say be a menace. If you I love to email large apartment companies and large hospital institutions and universities for institutions and organizations that have the funds to pay for sidewalk improvements and clearing snow and ice from their sidewalks. I am a menace, and I will report them on 311. I will email them. I will call them. Don't do that to just anyone, because there are a lot of legitimate reasons why someone cannot pay to repair their sidewalk or clear it. But for really big institutions that own a lot of property, they should be really clearing their sidewalk and creating that access. So I would say be a menace with some stipulations, I suppose.
Okay, we have 1 more minute left and one more question. Elisa, is there something you wanted to say?
No, I was going to say the same thing, so go for it.
Oh, okay, great. Katie, would you like to read the last question in the chat?
The last question. Is there a tension between sidewalk improvement and shade tree efforts? In many areas, the poor quality of the sidewalks is due to trees pushing sidewalks up.
Do you know, I've actually been on a couple of meetings regarding this. And I've really made a stink about that when people have talked about shade trees, and I've pointed out the problem with the sidewalks, and they'll say, well, these new trees that we're planting, they should be good for, 100 years before they start pushing up the sidewalk. And I've said, okay, but what about in 100 years? So, there's I don't know if this is exactly the answer, but earlier I had said that one of the things that people can do, you know, is talk to elected officials, talk to your borough council, your city council, and say, hey, this is a huge problem. Can you advocate with this your local arborist or whoever it is who's in charge of this and make these changes? And like, as Cassandra said, be a menace, be the squeaky wheel. If you know that new trees are being put in, I fully intend on doing this. I live in Uptown in Pittsburgh where there's going to be a whole bunch of new trees put in as part of the uh, Pittsburgh Regional Transit's university line. Um, I fully intend. I already have some contacts that I fully intend on haranguing about, the problem that trees present. So with that, shall I take over then for the last little bit?
Yes, thank you, Lisa.
Does anyone else have a final answer about the shade trees?
I'll just jump in very quickly to say that I was actually on a call today that was talking about how bus shelters really benefit from having shade trees planted next to them because they otherwise act kind of like an oven. And so people will elect to stand outside of the shelter rather than underneath it, without a shade tree by it. And also, I know that there's a lot of data about how having tree cover along your walk to get to and from public transit really people perceive uh, transit as being much more accessible, safe, comfortable with shade trees. So while both are important, is all to say. And so I think that Tree Pittsburgh and the Shade Tree Commission are conscious of the way that they can interact poorly with sidewalks. And so I think they think about that when they decide which trees to plant. The one last thing I'm going to just say is that I see this comment or question about what is being done to improve air quality in public transit vehicles. We are not currently organizing that around that in Pittsburghers for public transit. However, we have an entirely democratic decision-making process about what we do organize around. And we have committees that execute on organizing campaigns. And we're currently in our strategic planning process for next year. So if that is something you're interested in and you're, interested in public transit, I encourage you to come to our meetings and be part of shaping what our campaigns are for next year, if that's something that's a priority.
Okay, well then, Deja, thank you so much for moderating this panel today. Seth, Laura, Cassandra, amazing panel discussion. Thank you for coming out. Our wonderful interpreters, thank you for being here with us. As always, thank you so much to my board. Thank you to Katie and Mirami for all the technical work today. Huge thanks to Disability Pride PA for being our fiscal sponsor. And thank you to the Opportunity Fund for uh, funding us. Debbie, if you could put up the slide. So we have on the screen right now a slide with QR codes to a couple of our upcoming events. I will also put the links into the email and stuff. But on the 29th, September 29th to October 5th is the Week Without Driving. You can go to weekwithoutdrivingpgh.org. On Monday, November 24th, from 6 to 7:30, we're having our next virtual lecture night on food insecurity in the disability community. Then we have on January 26th from 6 to 7:30, The Last Accessibility Frontier, Parenting and Caregiving with a Disability. And Monday, March 30th from 6 to 7:30, Thinking Outside the Box, Employment and Persons with Disabilities. That will for all of those events for our upcoming lecture nights. If you go to accessmobpittsburgh.org, there is a drop down tab that says Community Lecture Night. Just hover on that, and then they're sorted by year, and you can find the links with more information. Next slide, please. I will say the survey and all the information that I've talked about already tonight I'll be sending it out either tonight or tomorrow morning. Please do fill out that survey. It really does help us. Our final slide that we have up here, we at Access Mob Pittsburgh run entirely on donations as well as on funding for grants. We have links or QR codes up for PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. If you do donate through either of those, be sure to put AMP for Access Mob Pittsburgh in the payment section so that our funders know that that money goes to us. Or you can go to accessmobpittsburgh.org/donate. The other organizations that were here tonight, feel free to please donate to them as well. Their websites will be in the email and in the YouTube description. And with that, we're ending exactly on time. Go us. And please come to our events, weekwithoutdriving.org or pgh.org, and then click on the events tab. And thank you everyone for coming out tonight. This was wonderful.
Thanks, everybody. And don't forget to come to the happy hour too. I think that that's a great place for us to party all together. And that will be at the end of this week from 4:30 to 6:30 at Federal Galley.
Please.